page 50. Today we're going to have a discussion over zimun, blessing after meal, but not only the conducting the blessing after meal, but also the concept of seudah with different decorum, such as 3 people versus 4, 7. A situation that some people left at the middle, some people finish, some participate, some not wish to participate. All the variation of blessing after meal, and basically how should we get together in the proper decorum to say the grace after meal together. The best situation is the all together say the bless after meal and that's it. But it turns sometimes that some people need to leave at the middle, some people eat a different food, some people wish to continue. So can we divide it, and if yes, how many? And making sure that not insulting the one who make the meal. What happened if he insisted in a certain way and we wish to do differently? For example, we soon have a discussion over Reish Galuta, the head of the exile, that they have a big meal with many hundreds of people, or some people wants to leave, some people wants to finish the meal, and they're afraid to do it. How basically we go about with this? So the first statement is about Baruchu and Nevarech. Before we start the meal, there are 2 different concepts. One they said Baruchu and one said Nevarech. So we discussed yesterday the Rashi and the Tosefta that said that using the word Nevarech, it's a little bit arrogant for a person who leads the zimun. We explained that the zimun, it's like the blessing after meal, the leading the blessing after meal, should be conducted by the head, which is either the most honorable person, or the head of the table, or the first one who washed the hand. So that's basically the discussion. Tanya Namei Hachi. Tanya Namei Hachi. Ben she'amar baruchu, ben she'amar nevarech, ein tofsim oto al kach, v'anakdanim tosim oto al kach. Which means, regardless if he used the word baruchu or he used the word nevarech, we are not so concerned about it. However, there are, Rashi said, davkanim, which means there are people who are very scrupulous, who are very critical, and they those who are really perfectionists, they go after him. Why you said baruchu and you basically exclude yourself from everyone else? Umi birchotam is another comment. Umi birchotav shel adam, the way that the persons make his blessing, nikar, you should recognize im talmid chachamu im lav, if he is a Torah scholar or not. Keitzad, how so? Rabbi Omer uvetuvo. Rabbi said, when you said a zimun, you should say uvetuvo, through with goodness we live. Harei ze talmid chacham, umituvo harei ze bur. What's the difference? There are 2 people. There is one person that said, thank you God, and another person said, thank you God. But in the Hebrew language, it's a difference between using in these words the letter bet or the letter mem. If you're using the letter bet, which means uvetuvo, that God is everything and He gives you whatever you need in the very best. Umituvo, it means that God have everything, but He gave us only life, which means you basically limited, you circumscribe God toward He is giving to just the life and nothing else. And therefore you call that person an ignoramus, which means he's have a lack of appreciation. He is basically limiting God, he's circumscribing God to conferral of His goodness. אמר לאביי לרב דימי והכתיב ומברכתך יבורך בית עבדך לעולם. So he said that in the book of Samuel chapter 7, they said, from you blessing may the house of your servant be blessed forever. So he said, since they said such a sentence, so why King David asked God in such sense Berachot, which is like mi'ut bebracha, like he limited the blessing. So the Gemarah answer said, no, he was different. Bish'ela shani, when you ask for a personal request and you have a specific need, you can limit it to the specific words. So the Gemarah asks, Bish'ela name ve'aktiv archev picha v'amaleu. So we said in the book of Psalm, they said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, in the Psalm 81, Archev picha, open your mouth and I will fill it. So it looks like it's lo derech eretz, it's inappropriate, it's incongruous to do. Rashi said, Lish'ol kol ta'avatcha, ask whatever you desire. So they said, Hahu b'divrei Torah ktiv, which means when a person needs to understand the Torah, so there's no boundaries. He needs to understand the Torah. He can ask as much as he needs, and the need for have a full comprehension of the Torah has no boundaries, is no limitation. Tanya, Rabbi Omer, Betuvo Chayinu, at the end of the Zimun we said, Baruch she'achalnu mishulo vetuvo chayinu, which means to whose goodness we live. Harei ze talmid chacham chayim, but if he said through goodness is life, as we said earlier, harei ze bu, again, because he's again the same thing. He excluding himself from God's goodness. That's what Rashi said. De'otzi atzmo min haklal. Nehar belai matne abchei. Nehar is name of the place. They learn the opposite. Veleit hilcheta kenehar belai. The halacha not follow them. They think the opposite way. That the other way around is like limiting God. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Nevarech she'achalnu mishelo arei ze talmid chacham. Lemi she'achalnu mishelo arei ze bur. Again, if you have someone who's not a learned person, he considering here as ignoramus, because he basically expresses a God in a very narrow way. He said that referring like the host who served the meal, but not Rashi said mashma merubin henze vehenze vehenze veze zan et ze lefi dvarav mevarech et baal habayit. So it appears that he is focusing on the host rather than the God. So that's also the Abu Draham said. Amar לרב אחא ברי דרבא לרב אשי, והאמרינן למי שעשה לאבותינו ולנו את כל הניסים האלו. So he said, but we said in Agadah during the Passover Seder, what we said, thank God who done to our ancestors, to our fathers, all these miracles. So that's part of the Seder. So he said, you see that God created miracles to other nations, but here the Leila Seder, in the Passover Seder, when we mentioned all of that, we said that say clearly, לאבותינו ולנו, את כל הניסים האלו, a specific miracle. אמר לי, הטעם, there in the Passover Seder, מוכחה מילתא, it's clear referring to God. My Navid say, who is the one who make this miracle? Kudshabrichu. It's clear that God make miracle. Even Pharaoh understand that all this miracle come from the Creator of the world. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Baruch she'achalnu mishelo, harei ze talmid chacham. Al hamazon she'achalnu harei ze bur. If someone said, bless you that we ate from him, is a Torah scholar. For the food is like ignoramus again, because he's not saying it to the proper, he said it just for the food. So Amar Ravuna Brei de Rav Yoshua lo Amarane bela bishlosha. What we said here about the three people that ate together, the Lake Hashem Shamayim, because there's no mention of name of heaven in the Zimun blessing. We just said Nevarech she'achalnu mishelo without Elokeinu. Aval ba'asara deik Hashem Shamayim, because he used in Asara in a 10 נזימון, the name of God, נברך לאלוקינו שאכלנו משלו, מוכח המילתא, so therefore it's obvious that you mentioned the name of God, and they said clearly אלוקינו, כדתנן, as we learn in the Mishnah. כעניין שהוא מברך כך עונים אחריו, the same manner that he make the blessing, they respond to him, ברוך השם אלוקי ישראל, אלוקי הצבקות, יושב הקרובים, על המזון שאכלנו. כן? So basically, he mentioning that he's talking about the food, and he have the praising of the Creator, and he's speaking about the food. So it's all together, wrap it up clearly. 11 ו-11 ריבו. The Mishnah said that regardless to the number of 10 or 10 myriads of people, הגוף הקשה, this is a contradiction. Why? אמרת 11 ו-11 ריבו, you said that there's no difference whether there are 10 people or 10 myriads of people. הלמה כי הדד אינינו, which means that any large size, והדר קטן, later we said, במאה אומר, when you have 100 people, באלף אומר, when you have 1,000 people, בריבו אומר, when you have myriads of people, so you see the different type of group. And before you said it makes no difference if it's 10 or 10 million. Amar Rav Yosef lo kashya. Rav Yosef said it's not questioned because a different controversy. Here are Rabbi Yosef Lira, Rabbi Akiva. That's referring to different machloket, different dispute. Detnan. Rabbi Yosef Lira omer, lefi rov hakahal en mebarchim. They recite the blessing according to the amount of people who assemble. שנאמר, as it's written, במקהלות ברכו אלוקים, which means without the quorum of makeilah, of gathering, that every makeilah have their own lachan, have their own way of expressing themselves. אמר רבי עקיבא responded and he said, מה מצינו בבית הכנסת? What Rabbi Akiva said, that they have נוסח אחיד, that is one way. So it's no different that this some people or many. So regarding to Zimun, he hold that if there are 10 people, it is the same as there are many, no difference. So that's basically that machlok Rabbi Akiva. How krad Rabbi Yosef Lima Yavidlei. So how he explained the Pesach, the source Rabbi Yosef Li brought. He said, "Makalot baruchu Elokim." He brought the pasuk. So Gemarah said, "Midbar lechdetanya." היה רב מאיר אומר, רב מאיר said, מניין שאפילו עוברים שבמי מה אומרים שירה על הים, how do you know that even a little infant said the song of the sea, שנאמר, is it written, במקהלות ברכו לאלוקים, השם מקור ישראל. So you see here for the pasuk of מקהלות, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it's רוב הקהל, and according to Rabbi Akiva, it's even those who are in the makor, in the rechem, in the womb of the mother. Ve'idach, and the other sage, Rabbi Yosef Glili, how he holds. So he said, Mimkor nafka. He derived from the word source, from Mimkor, which means Makalot is the Nusach. Mekor is like Shirat Hayam, the song of the sea. Amarava alakha ke Rabbi Akiva, which means regardless if it's a 10 or a 10,000, you said Elokeinu. Ravina ורחמה בר בוזי קראו לבייש רש גלותה. They came before the head of the exile, רש גלותה. קם רב חמה וקם עדה רבי 100. So Rav Chada get together a group of 100 in order to say the zimun. אמר לרבינה לא צריכה. Ravina said you don't need to bother. אחרי אמר רב הלכה כרבי עקיבא, which means it makes no difference. Why you need to get 100? אמר רבא כי אכלין ריפתא בגלותה. When we ate bread by the house of the head of the exile, Resh Galuta, mevarchin al shlosha. We said the zimun 3-3. So, what's the purpose? Why the 3-3? V'livarchu 10. Maybe they should get it together. There's so many. Should get it together, a group of 10. He said, Shamar Galuta v'ipkat, because the head of the exile, the Resh Galuta, he maybe take offense, which means he forced them to sit for the entire meal. So, what did they do? Some people get together 3 and 3 and did a zimun. So they're already done with the meal, but they're forced to stay, so they stay there. Which means they make the zimun, but in order not to get him angry, the Reish Galuta, they stay there. So that's the reason why they divided to 3. So they ask, V'nifku b'ircheta the Reish Galuta, Why they need to do it in a secret way? They can do it with what he said. It's leading. He said, "Aide de avshu kule alma lo shamei." They're concerned because there's such a large amount of people, they may not hear the zimun properly. So in one hand, they don't want him to take offense, so they divide it to a small group. On the other hand, they don't want to do the zimun with such a large crowd, since they don't hear it properly. Amar Rav Tosefta, "Hane shlosh adar cherifta ba'adei adadei vekadim chad mina uvrich adadei infku nafkin bezimun didei." If you have three people and one starts blessing by himself or without zimun, so the other two, they are free from their obligation to participate in the zimun. Iu lo nafik bezimun didu lefi shen zimun lemafreya, because there is no retroactive way of zimun, and you cannot make zimun after you finish Birkat Hamazon. So therefore, they do not discharge his obligation on them by joining the zimun. Rabbi Ishmael Omer. So they say Rabbi Ishmael Omer that in a shul the leader will say Berakhot Hashem Amvorach. Bless Hashem as one. Rafram Bar Papa Ikla Lebeknisha de Abi Givar. We went to the synagogue with Abi Givar, and we mentioned Rafram Bar Papa is one of the children of Rav Papa. I mentioned at the end of each Masechet. Kam Kara Besifra. He came and started reading from the Torah scroll. V'amar Baruchu et Hashem. He said Baruchu et Hashem. V'ishtik v'lo amar Amvorach. Bless is one. Avshu kol alma. So the entire crew respond loudly Baruchu et Hashem Amvorach. Marava ba'ad de plugta lamalach. Why did they get involved in this feud? V'od anahug alma ki Rabbi Ishmael. Especially that everyone follow Rabbi Ishmael to say what? To say Baruchu et Hashem HaMevorachs. Right? So basically the whole purpose is to emphasize it. That's the way we're doing it. By the way, that's the halacha which we'll mention later. Continue the Mishnah. שלושה שאכלו כאחד אינן רשאים לחלק, וכן ארבעה וכן חמישה. Three who are ate together are not permitted to separate, and the same apply to 4 and 5. Some word of introduction. The condition for zimun, in order to be satisfied, the recitation is not optional, it's obligatory. So therefore, if a group has become obligated to conduct a collective blessing, the member of that group may not dispense until they have fulfilled this obligation to recite a collective blessing. So now the Mishnah elaborates on this rule. So they said 3 who are ate together are not permitted to separate, since they are obligated to recite a collective blessing. So the member of this group may not recite Birkat Hamazon separately and individually, but must conduct a collective blessing and recite Birkat Hamazon together in one group. That's the word of Rashi. He said, "V'yitchayvu lo bezimun v'chen arba'a ein ha-shlosha mezamnim v'yachid yichalek mehem de'iu name ikva b'chovat zimun." So the same apply to 4 and 5. The obligation to participate in the zimun is a personal obligation of every member of the group that ate together. So therefore, even there are 3 people of the original group who remain to conduct the zimun, the 4th and the 5th member may not separate and recite the Birkat Hamazon on their own. That's what Rashi said. And by the way, we discussed later halacha, but that's the Magen Avraham in 193 said as well. The Mishnah continued and it said, Shisha nechlakim ad asara, which is 6 may separate up to 10, which means group that consists of 6. So Rashi said, Kedei zimul lechan vekedei zimul lechan, which means a group that consisting of 6, 7, 8, or 9 people may separate into group of 3 or more people, since each group of 3 will have its own quorum. So, just a side note, the Ravad maintained that not only is a group of 6 permitted to split into 2 groups, it's required to do it, it's an obligation, and they have to say, according to Ravad, the Nevarech formula is preferred to the Baruchu formula, which we discussed yesterday. So the whole concept, some hold like Levush, that Berov Amadrat Melech, that you have a large group, it's better than small. Then the Mishnah said, V'asara enan nechlakim ad shiyu 20, but 10 may not separate it. So Rashi said beautifully, and he said, Aval asara enan nechlakim ditchayvu lo bezimun azkarat Hashem ad shiyu 20, v'az yichalku im yirtzu l'shtei chavurot, which means As we explained in the early Mishnah 3, when you have the obligation of Zimun formula, so you have a group of 10 people. So when you have 10, they need to include the name of Hashem. Nevarech Elokeinu she'achalnu mishlo. You need to add the name of God. So since the Zimun formula for a group of 3 does not, a group of 10 may not separate into smaller groups, because then you have an issue with eliminating the name of Hashem. Although the smaller groups will also conduct Zimun, but nevertheless, their formula will basically not mention the Hashem's name, and is therefore considered inferior to the Zimun of a group of 10. That's what Rashi said here. Ad Shiyusrima, up to the 20, because the mean is they have 10 and 10. So even you have, for example, 10 and you have 19 people, so they cannot split, because then one group will say without name of Hashem, one group say with the name of Hashem. So that's the reason why they cannot split until they get 20, and then you have 10 and 10. The Pri Megadim, just a side note, later on we discuss Halacha, the Pri Megadim mentioned in the Halacha that in Or HaChaim he explained that even if you have a group of 6 that divided to 2 group or 3, it's certainly preferable the group of 10, 20 that conduct a single zimun blessing of a large group rather than the 2 group of 10. If you remember, we said that is a concept that's called Berov Ha'am Madrat Melech, that King Solomon said in Proverbs, a multitude of people is a king's glory. So this is particularly relevant to the zimun blessing of a group of 10 or more, since the formula actually mentions God's name. So accordingly, a group of 20 shows more honor than the 2 group of 10, and therefore it's preferred. Then the Mishnah continued and said, if they have 2 groups that eating in one house, that is, if 2 group of people were eating in the same house, each in a different table, that's the Meiri said later in the explanation. So there is a different opinion as to the size of the groups. So some explain that this is ruling apply each and every group consisted of less than the 3 people. The others said differently, but they said Bizman shemiktsatan elu ro'in et elu, when some of them can see other, harei elu mitztarifim lezimun, they are combined for a collective blessing. If some of the members of the group are able to see some of the members of the other group, the group may combine to act as one group for zimun. For example, if 2 people are eating in one corner of the house, and 2 others are eating together in another corner, and one person of one group can see one person from the other, the 2 groups may combine to form a quorum and conduct the zimun blessing. There is a lot of explanation. If you read the Meiri and the Rashba, they elaborate on that. We just give the abbreviation because we showed with time. And then the Mishnah said, V'im lav eilu mezamnim la'atzmam. But if not, so they conduct a collective blessing by themselves, and these conduct a collective blessing by themselves. So which means that if it's no members of the group is visible to any member of the other group, so the 2 groups cannot combine for joint collective blessings. So however, the Gemarah explained later, we see that even when they cannot see each other, if both groups are being served by the same waiter, they can combine for zimun even the waiter did not eat with them. So that's the Gemarah later discussed. And then the Mishnah concluded and said, En mevarchim al hayayin ad sheiten letocho mayim divrei Rabbi Eliezer chachamim mevarchim. Some mode of introduction. In those days they cannot drink the wine. The wine in those days was so heavy, there's several Gemorahs that discuss it, that it's such a level of concentration that it's not just make you drunk, it's really impossible to drink that wine. So the wine of that Mishnaic period was so strong that was not fit for drinking until you diluted it with water. So Rabbi Eliezer ruled that prior to dilution it's not yet classified as wine, and therefore does not classified of Borei Pri Hagafen blessing. So for those who wish to drink it, it's a need to be undiluted. So it remained a blessing. It's a grape, which is Borei Pri Ha'etz. That's what he held. And the Chachamim Omrim Mevarchim, but the sages said, we recite the blessing. The sages say that even prior to delusion, it's considered wine, and it's in a blessing is Borei Pri Hagafen, although it's undiluted wine is not really considered a drinking beverage, but it's nevertheless the primary ingredient in a portion called, later in the Gemarah call it koriati. So it's some type of wine. Rashi here Oh no, it's not here. But the Rashi, the other later in the Gemarah elaborate on the reason for that. So the Gemarah asks, "My kamash melan." Beginning of the Mishnah, we learn that three people are ate together. They are not dispensed. So the Gemarah said, "What does this Mishnah teach us?" Tanina chadazimna. Shlosha she'achlu ke'echad chayavim lezamen. What we learned was that if three people are ate together, they're required to form a zimun. So what does that mean? We basically pshita. We learned it earlier. So what's the chidush? They said hakamash melan. It's come the halacha teach us. Kiad amar Rabbi Abba amar Shmuel. That's what Rabbi Abba said in the name of Shmuel. Shlosha sheyashvu le'echol ke'achat v'adayin lo achlu. If there are three individuals that sat together to eat, but they not yet began to eat, so nevertheless, enan rasha'im lechalek. They are not permitted to divide, to recite the Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meal, individually. Lishna achrina, the second option, not a version. Amar Rabbi Abba amar Shmuel hachektane. Rabbi Abba said to Shmuel, that's the way you should learn this Mishnah. Shlosha sheyashvu le'echol ke'achat. If you have three individuals that is said together to eat together in a sense like one in one time, af al pi shekol echad ve'echad ochel mikikaro, even each and every one of them eats from its own loaf, einan rashayin lechalek. They are considered as a single group in a term of zimun, and they are not permitted to separate, to divide it to different groups. Inami, or another option, alternatively, ki ha de Rav Huna. This Mishnah teaches the halacha according to Rav Huna. The Amar Rav Huna, shlosha sheba'u mishalosh chavurot. If there are three individuals who came from three different groups, einan rasha'in lechalek, which means this halacha was explained in a manner of that it's a different interpretation, but the key point is that the three who come from three different groups are not permitted to divide and leave the original group, but rather they must stay and return to the original group and participate in a zimun there. So Rav Aigaon added to that, and he said that if they already formed their own zimun, although they acted improperly, the obligation to rejoin the obligation group for the zimun is eliminated. So now, basically what we understand that if you have three group of people, that each group contained three people, and one of them left, parash, so they have to mitztaref, they have to be together in the zimun. Why? Because they settle a seuda. So for that, Amar Rav Chizda said, Vehu, and it's a condition, this halacha is a conditional that what? Sheba'u mishalosh chavurot shel shlosha bnei adam. That the condition here that they have to have three groups of three people each, and that each original group was independently obligated to recite the zimun, and that obligation never lapsed. So because of that, it never lapsed. So that's the reason why they cannot divide it. One person cannot poresh, cannot leave them as a separate chavura. So Amar Rava qualified this, and he said, "Velo Amaran." We only said this halacha in case ela delo akdimu hanach ve'az munalayu beduchtayu. That it's only where those members of the previous group did not include them in a zimun in the original place. Aval izmun alayu beduchtayu, but in a case where they included them in zimun in the original place, parach zimun minayu. The obligation to participate in a zimun has left them. What does that mean? The obligation to incumbent upon these three individuals from a zimun, they stems from the obligation to form the zimun with the members of the original groups. If their groups already included them in zimun, their obligation as individuals are lapsed, and basically they no longer form another zimun. Amar Rava mena minala. So Rava asked, where do you learn that? Ditan mita shenigneva chetzia. So he said that in the Mishnah, if it's an impure bed, that a half of which was stolen, or she'avda chetzia, or half of that was lost, or shechilkua achim, or they divided by brothers. So they said, or shutafim, or if it's a partnership, so itehora. So so here there is a hilchot in Tuma and Tara. They're dealing here with a situation of a bed that they have either partnership or they have a part of that was stolen. So they talk about Tuma and Tara, pure and impure, and it's a, soon you see the connection to our discussion, hechzirua. But if they restore it, which means they put the parts, they attach the part back, מקבל טומאה מכאן ולהבא, they retroactively, it is susceptible to ritual impurity from here and onward. מכאן ולהבא אין למפריע לו, which means from here is yes, that it means it is susceptible to ritual impurity, but retroactively no, למפריע לו, alma. So what do you learn from that? So it's not resumed its previous status of ritual impurity. So once it was divided, the ritual impurity, כיוון דפלגוע פרח לה מטומאה מינה, אך אינה מכיוון דאזמון עליו, פרח זימון מינהיו. Now you see the connection. It says the same way that you cannot, it restore, it does not resume its previous status of ritual impurity. So you said here too, once it's included them in a zimun, the obligation left them, and they not reassume the previous obligation. So that's the hekesh, that's the limud that we have from the Tuma and Tara to our discussion over zimun. Shtei chavurot. So the Mishnah said it was a two group. If you remember, we discussed two groups that the waiter, they have a waiter among them, and the waiter joined them in a single group. So they cannot see each other. So these im tana im yesh shamash benem shamash metzarfam. So the shamash can join them, and even they cannot see each other. So they said, "En mevarchim alayim tanu rabanan." What we learn in the Mishnah, that if you have a wine and the wine is so heavy and it is not diluted, so we said that there is machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Chacham. So tanu rabanan, the sages teach us, yain ad shelo natan l'tocho mayim en mevarchim alav borei pri hagam leborei pri ha'etz. Since in the Talmudic time we explaining the Mishnaic time, if you have a wine that is not diluted, it's not capable of drinking, so therefore they hold that you have borei pri ha'etz, it's a fruit from a tree, but it's not ready for wine. And he go further to say, v'notlim alav yadayim. Okay, so few things. First, we have here Rashi and a Tosefta. Two point here. First of all, the idea here is that you, in one hand, Rabbi Eliezer hold that if you cannot drink it because it's not mazug, it's not diluted, so he hold that okay. So if that's the case, you can even wash your hand. And in other words, you can use that wine for other purposes. Mishenatan letocho mayim. The minute you dilute it with water, mevarchin ala borei pri hagafen ve'ein notlim ala yadayim. Why? Because it's already considered davar choshuv. It's already important. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. That's Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer hold as long as it's not diluted, so you can wash hands. It's the same value as a regular water. There's no chashivut. And that's what Rashi said. Ki lo natan letocho mayim lo havi ela kemei perot. It's the same as just the water of the fruits. And Tosefta add to that, it said miuresh meforshim kriyat yadayim ba'in al-mayim k'dichtiv yadav lo shatav b'hem. That it's not proper to use it for netilas yadayim, because netilas yadayim should use particularly water. והחכמים אומרים, the sages said, בין כך ובין כך מברכים עליו בורא פרי הגפן ונוטלים ממנו לידיים. The sage said, regardless in either case whether water has been added to or not, it's considered wine for all intents and purposes, and therefore you said bore pri hagafen, and you not allowed to use it for washing hands. So now the Gemara asks a question. According to those opinion, what is Keman Azlach? To whom they go? דאמר שמואל עושה אדם כל צרכיו בפת, כמען כרבי אליעזר. Shmuel hold that the person can use all his needs in a bread, which means all the purpose for any food he can use for bread. So therefore, he basically hold that any purposes you can wash hands. That's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. So basically, Rabbi Eliezer will permit the one to wash his hand with undiluted wine. אמר רבי יוסי בחלין עמודים חכמים לרבי אליעזר בקול של ברכה, which means that if you have a cup of wine over the ברכת המזון, the grace after meal is recited, שאין מברכים עליו כשליטון בתוך המים, it's not ready for drinking as בור פרי הגפן, so you need to dilute it with the water, and then you can make a bracha, and as long as you don't dilute it with the water, you cannot make a bracha. Okay? Which means the way that Rabbi Eliezer hold that you can take even a grape juice and wash the hands, he hold that you cannot do that, because he said that it's a ברכת המזון בברכה. מה הייתה אמר רב אושה? בעינן מצווה מן המובחר. We said that if it's not ready for drinking, it's not royal לשתייה, it's not מובחר. We call it a mitzvah to be performed in the best possible way. The Rabbanan and the rabbis, the sages, lemai chazei. So the rabbis, what is the undiluted wine, which is virtually undrinkable feet? Amar Rabbi Zeira said, chazei lekortaye, which means he said that it's used for any medicine drink, which means there are several medicine that made out of wine and oil. It's called mashke lerefuah, and it's a shvach, and it's therefore is bor pragafen. But by the way, that's not the halacha. So in other words, the kortaye, it's the word in Greek that it's a karutis, which is a type of a nut-shaped date. So it's a mix of various liquid, strong wine, and used for some type of medical purposes. So that's the purpose of using it as a kortaye. But halacha is not according to that opinion so far. Tanu Rabbanan, ארבעה דברים נאמרו בפת. So you have the topic of using certain food. So they said, אין מניחים בשר חי על הפת. Why? Because if you have a blood, imagine blood dripping out of a meat, and you put it on a slice of bread. Makes no sense, right? Or, והם מעבירים כוס מלא על הפת. You don't pass a full cup of wine over the bread, because the wine drip it and ruin the bread. ואין זורקים את הפח. You not throw bread. ואין סומכים את הקערה בפת. Why? It's a concept in הלכה that's called ביזוי אוכלים, that you cannot use a certain food, drop its dish or piece of bread, which means the need to treat bread with respect. The Maharsha elaborated that there's a concept in Judaism that first of all, we don't throw away because en ma'avirin ala ochlin, there are people who maybe eat it, but furthermore, it's a certain respect. There are so many people who starve in this world, so you have to have a certain respect for that. And bizui ochlim, if you put something that's dripping blood or dripping wine on the bread, it's considering bizui ochlim, or throwing the bread. So, Meimar Umar Zutra, so it's a story that relates to that. Verav Ashe krachu rifta behadei adadei aitele kamayu tamrei verimone, which means they ate bread together, and they have this type of date and pomegranates, and they put it together. And what happened is shakal mar zutra patak lekamei de Rav Ashi disna, which is Mar Zutra took fruit and threw a portion before Rav Ashi. So basically the Maharsha explained that it was a cooked meat. אמר לי, לא סבר למר להה לתניא, אין זורקין את האוכלין, that you don't throw away food. So don't you think my teacher, my master, that you're throwing away food? So he said, he responded, he said, Ahi befat Tanya. That was taught in regard to bread, but that's not applied to other food. So they said, why are you saying that? He says, Vatanya kishem shen zorkin et hapach, kach en zorkin et haochlin. The Braita tells that the same way that you don't throw bread, you don't throw other food. Amarle, so Mar Zutra responded to him and he said, Vehatanya, af al pi she'en zorkin et hapat, aval zorkin et haochlin. Wasn't the opposite to what you learn in the Braita? That although one may not throw bread, you may throw other food. Which, what you see here, that it's sometimes yes, sometimes not, it gets confusing. Because the Berachot are contradicting one another. Sometimes you say you allow, sometimes not, sometimes it says only something that is not bread. So elolokashia. So it's not difficult. The two Berachot are not different cases. Why? Ha b'mide demim is, ha b'mide delomim is. Simple. If the item become disgusting when you throw, that's one case. But if not, then it's prohibited. So in other words, the time that we allow, if it's a situation, for example, we call it in halachot, lo ra'ui lemachal kelev, that even a dog cannot eat it, etc. If the food became so disgusting, so you can throw it away. Tanu Rabbanan. ממשיכים יין בצינורות לפני חתן ולפני כלה, וזורקים לפניהן כליות ואגוזים בימות החמה, אבל לא בימות הגשמים. So the sages tells us that one may draw wine through pipes before the bride and groom. So it's like an omen. So you go to the Moroccan's wedding, you see that before the chuppah, they drop on them all kind of before the bride and the groom, they put the perfume on them. It's all kind of they throw some have some wine, and they call it mazal, shefa, hatzlacha. You hear it in the Moroccan's wedding. So he said here, so you use it in a certain time in the summer, before in the summertime, but both in the rainy season you can do it. But in the summer they can be retrieved and eaten, which is not the case in the rainy season. So he said, "Avlo gluskaot," but one not throw cakes. Lo bimot hachama v'lo b'dag shemim, neither in the summer nor in the winter. So again, what happened? You have in Israel, I saw it a lot with the Moroccan's wedding. So they believe that that's part of the luck, so they throw on them all kind of things, right? So if it's a perfume, it's fine. But if it's food, the Gemarah said, "Lo gluskaot." If it's cake, you shouldn't do it. It's bizui ochalim. Amar Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda said, "Shachach ve'echnis ochalim letoch piv belo bracha." Since we discussed all the halachot in Berachot, so he said, if someone forgot and put food item in his mouth and he doesn't say the bracha, mesalkan letzad echad umevarech. He moved the food in one side of his mouth and he should say the bracha. Say the bracha, right? Tanya Chada, now it's a machloket how you should do it. Tanya Chada once taught in a Braita how bol an, he swallowed them, right? So that's one idea, that he need to swallow them, and then the other one is v'tanya idach poltan, and the other one in the Braita said he spits them out. V'tanya idach mesalkan, he moves them to the side of his mouth. So it basically is again a contradiction. How you explain it? So it's a lokashia. It's not difficult. Why? Had the Tanya Bol'an the mashkin, the one who said that you should swallow. That's applied to what? To a drinking liquid. They had the Tanya Poltan, and one that said that you should spit them. What is applied? Bemidi delomam is. In the food that's not become disgusting, which means if you move it from your mouth, you can subsequently eat it. Ve'aletanya mesalkan b'midi demamis. But when the writer tells us that you should throw them out, that you should spit them, it's applied to what? Something that it's really becomes so disgusting that it's sufficient to move it to the side. Rashi explained, which means something that you can eat, but something that it's not, then for sure it's not applicable. Okay, concluding halachot, what we learn in this daf. Number one is shinui mi matbea shetav'u chachamim. The Shulchan Aruch Kuf Tzadik Bet, Shulchan Aruch 192 said as follows: Ein leshanot matbea shetavu chachamim bebrachot, which means if the sages institute some certain of blessing, a person cannot divert it and change it in the way that he wished to. I always said it's like if you have a piece of music like Bach music, you cannot temper with the music and change some lines just because you don't like some. It's a masterpiece. You cannot go to a picture of the Three Musketeers and say, let me shave one of them. It's a masterpiece. The same applies to halachot. We said that one may not divert from a formula instituted by the sages in blessing. So all this idea of changing the blessings, so you cannot, it's a matbea shetavu chachamim, is a constitute by the sages. It's in our language is like a masterpiece. When it's a masterpiece, we have no right, including rabbis, to change something that there is a matbea shetavu chachamim. Another halacha we learn, it's the Shulchan Aruch Kuf Tzadik Gimel. One is a different chaburot that divided. So the first point is for those who just begin this shiur. So in order to have a zimun, we have to have 3 people. So we recite grace after meal. The minimum condition for reciting bless after meal, we need to have 3 people. But if in a situation where it's impossible to hear the leader of a zimun due to the size of the crowd, so the people should divide themselves into a smaller group of whatever they are. If they are 10 or if they are less, they are even the 3. And the story we mentioned, the Reish Galuta, that they still stay, but they make it a zimun because it was such a large crowd and they cannot hear the Reish Galuta, or the big zimun. In question about zimun lemafreya, shlosha she'achlu ke'echad, Shulchan Aruch Kuf Tzadik Dalet 194 said, if 3 people ate together, v'kam echad mehem uberech, and one of them preceded the other 2 and he make already berakat hamazon, yecholim hashnayim letzarfo lezimunam, the 2 others can include him in their zimun, aval hu eno yotze bezimun, but he cannot be part of the zimun because it's not such a thing, a retroactive zimun. Zimun lemafreya, it's not applicable. Another thing is, we learn that the halacha is in this matter is according to Rabbi Akiva. So the way that we said at zimun, it's by the way of Rabbi Akiva, and Rambam also said in Chot Filah in chapter 9 that that's the way it is. The Mishnah said that if shlosha she'achlu ke'echad enan rasha'in lechalek, so the Mishnah said that if there are 3 people who ate as one, they're not permitted to divide it. So up to 5 people, they are dining together, so they may not divide into a smaller group, but from 6 to 10, they may divide it into groups for at least 3 for each. So in that sense, with the richer group of 10 or even 19 people, we said that they should not divide it because it's 10-10 is the name of Hashem. And I recommend that you see the Rambam elaborated at that in Hilchot Berachot chapter 5. Now, what happens if we have tziruf chavurot? If we need to combine a different group to do a zimun, so if there are 2 groups in a house, and they are just in different rooms, but they can see each other from different rooms. So they said here that if they see each other, they combine for zimun. But there is a machloket between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, and there's a lot of interpretation. The Rosh elaborate on that. And again, we short in time, so we'll not go there, but basically there is a machloket how they can do it and which way. Shlosha she'yashvu le'echol ke'achat, if there are 3 who sat as one, which means that if 3 sat to eat, and even if each eating have their own bread by itself, But if they're not, if it's a situation that they did not yet eat the kezait, which is like olive bark, so they not divide the way that we explain the opinion of Shmuel. And if there are three people, shlosha sheba'u mishalosh chavurot, if there are three, came from three different groups, so we say that so they're not divided, because again the whole key is that to have the zimun and to have the zimun properly. Now another two halachot. We said that about tziruf shamash. If you have a waiter that is serving people, and even he's going around between two different locations. Imagine that you have a caterer people that cater for two different simchas, and there are two different locations in two different places. But if you need to include someone in the zimun, so if even the waiter, it's basically is just a person who served, but you can include them for the zimun. But again, it's a machloket. The Talmud Yerushalmi is not crazy about this situation, but the Bavli basically hold that that's the way the Rambam also hold, that as long as they need him just to be mitztaref, not to lead the zimun, to be mitztaref, to be part of the zimun, it's fine. In regards to birkat hayayin, the blessing over the wine, so there is a discussion here in the Mishnah. The wine need to be diluted, and we explained that the Mishnaic time was different, because the Mishnaic time you need to have like about in every cup the other three of water, because the wine was so heavily strong and they cannot drink it. So they basically if someone drink it and it's before diluted, so there is a different blessing. It's bora priya. It's only when they're diluted and they are capable of chashivut of wine, then you go to the bora priya gafen. However, we hold that we're not washing hands with that. It was an opinion of one of the rabbis that you may wash the hands, because he hold it as the same category as using it as a food, using it as something else. And he said no, we should not do that. But the Rashba elaborate on that, and again it's a question. It's basically a category, as the Tosefta mentioned, as a mei perot. It's like using it because it's not diluted, not in a category of wine. Now, in regard to using food, we said that food basically need to utilize for any purpose, as long as it does not become too disgusting for to be eaten. So, for example, throwing bread is absolutely forbidden under any circumstance, because it's a display of contempt of this significant food. There's a long discussion among the Meforshim, Magen Avraham and the Bach, discuss what exactly happened in this type of situation. But in general, as long as it's not absolutely disgusting situation, the bread has its own chashivut, and we're not allowed to throw it. I just read recently an article that there are people that not just starving. They said in that article that the global article, that said that if you carry $15 in your pocket, you are among the 10% of the most richest people in the world, which means the level of poverty around the world, people who just want a piece of bread. I read an article that 50 million people dream in their life is to drink a cup of coffee. So when we are blessed with bread, it's a prohibition to throw it away. It's a avera. Now we discuss also about the food that you put in your mouth. So if food you put in your mouth, so it's a question what type of food and what's. But basically, if you can make the bracha. If it's not a full swallow bracha by itself. But Rambam explained in the Hilchot Berachot chapter 8. Basically, if you can put it aside and make a bracha, that's great. If not, then you can make a bracha while, and we divided between drinking it and eating it. These two different categories.